The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. The 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. In today's society, this amendment is taken very lightly. Women do not realize that less than 100 years ago, women in the United States did not have the right to vote. It wasn't until 1920 that Congress ratified the 19th Amendment, giving all women the right to vote. The struggle for women's rights was known as the suffrage movement, and a key player was Alice Paul. To know how Alice Paul got to where she was, you have to know her background. Alice Paul was born to William and Tacy Paul in Morristown, New Jersey on January 11, 1885. Her father was very successful in life, earning a comfortable living as a businessman. She grew up on a farm where her parents raised her to believe in gender equality and the need to work for the betterment of society. This was a key principle she lived by throughout her life. She was greatly influenced by Hicksite Quakers, who believed in separation from the burgeoning materialistic society and advocated the benefits of staying closer to nature. Education. Alice Paul attended Hicksite School in Morristown, New Jersey, and then went to Swarthmore College, which happened to be the school that her grandfather helped found. Swarthmore was a co-ed school that believed in a Quaker education, which taught that women should have an equal education to men. Alice graduated with a degree in biology. In 1907, Paul went to England, where she stayed for a while studying social work. England is where Paul learned a more radical approach to suffrage. Paul learned this approach from some of the most radical women in England, the Pankhurst women. They took a more violent stand towards suffrage. She brought a lot of these radical views back to America. Alice Paul fought for women's rights to vote. She joined the National American Women's Suffrage Association, NAWSA. While working at the NAWSA, she was stationed in Washington, D.C., where she organized a huge parade. The parade was intended to raise awareness about the suffrage movement. It did just that, but in a negative way. During the parade, onlookers turned violent, causing media coverage all over the U.S. The president of the NAWSA was Carrie Chapman Catt. Paul and Catt had the same goal, but different views on how to get there. Because of this, in 1914, Paul and her followers created the National Women's Party, NWP, and parted from the NAWSA. Alice Paul created the National Women's Party, NWP. The NWP took a stronger approach rather than a political approach to the NAWSA. They participated in silent centennials. This is where they stood outside the White House holding banners and signs protesting to President Wilson about the suffrage movement. Some of the banners read, "Mr. President, how long must we wait for liberty?" Or, "We demand an amendment to the United States Constitution enfranchising women." Alice Paul was sent to jail for what she believed in. At first, the president disregarded the NWP picketing at the White House, but after we entered into World War I, many Americans, including the president, thought it to be wrong and unpatriotic to picket a wartime president. The NWP, including Paul, would often be attacked by angry mobs. Paul thought if they were to stop the protesting, then they would lose all that they had gained, so she pushed on. After many incidents of angry mobs, police began arresting the suffragists on bogus charges, one of them being Alice Paul. After being arrested, Paul and the other suffragists would be charged and sent to Occoquan Workhouse. At the workhouse, Paul and her suffragists would often be beaten. A reporter wrote, "Under orders from W.H. Whitaker, superintendent of the Occoquan Workhouse, as many as 40 guards with clubs went on a rampage, brutalizing 33 jailed suffragists. They beat Lucy Burns, chained her hands to the cell bars above her head, and left her there for the night. They hurled Dora Lewis into a dark cell, smashed her head against an iron bed, and knocked her out cold. Her cellmate, Alice Cuso, who believed Miss Lewis to be dead, suffered from a heart attack. According to affidavits, other women were grabbed, dragged, beaten, choked, slammed, pinched, twisted, and kicked." Barbara Lehman, Katharine Hepburn, New York Crown Publisher, 1995. While at the workhouse, Paul and her suffragists went on a hunger strike, where they stopped eating for days. The workhouse was ordered to force-feed them by sticking tubes down their throats. This procedure often left their throats and stomachs bleeding. When this news reached the newspapers, it spread like wildfire, outraging Americans and also gaining more support for Alice Paul's cause. Americans demanded for their release, and with no other option, President Wilson ordered their release. Alice Paul in passing the 19th Amendment. Due to the outrage towards the abuse in the workhouse, President Wilson changed his mind and supported a suffrage amendment. Then, in 1919, both the House and the Senate passed the 19th Amendment. In August of 1920, the states ratified the amendment, making it official. Alice Paul and her struggle for equal rights. Many of the suffragists left the scene after the 19th Amendment was ratified, but Alice Paul kept going, fighting for equality in every aspect, not just voting. She began working on the Lucretia Mott Amendment that stated, men and women shall have equal rights throughout the United States in every place subject to its jurisdiction. This amendment was introduced many times to Congress but wasn't passed until 1972. It unfortunately was not ratified by the states. In 1943, the bill was rewritten and called the Alice Paul Amendment. After the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, Paul earned 3 different law degrees. She traveled all over Europe, eventually stating the World Women's Party, WWP. The WWP was stationed in Geneva, Switzerland. They worked with the League of Nations Commission on the Status of Women. She also was a part of adding the Sexual Discrimination Clause to the Civil Rights Acts. In conclusion, Alice Paul played a huge role in the freedoms that women have today. If it wasn't for Alice Paul and the countless of other women from our past who fought for our rights, we would still be ignorant women under the thumb of men, incapable of making our own decisions and creating our own futures. So women of America, think about Alice Paul the next time you are too busy to go vote or don't want to get involved in politics. And know she fought for your voice, so use it.